Hello everyone, how's it going? My name is Elias to everyone new and old, returning and recurring, visiting for the first time, for the last time, whatever it is. But in today's video, that's the most important thing, I am going to be giving you guys an updated list, if you will, of my top favorite books of all time. Specifically, more about my favorite books that I've read so far this year. So it's been a good maybe 2 years since I last updated this list. You will see some familiar and some of the same books. If you had checked that video out, you will see some of the books in this video as well. But before, we dive into all the shenanigans, I just want to quickly mention that I have a Patreon now. If you're looking for more exclusive content, behind the scenes, a monthly Patreon book club, movie nights, you can definitely join. All the extra content on that other end, I would love to have you. Also, another thing, I'm sitting on my table right here. And you notice that couch right over there? It's Pierre's couch now. Because you know why? I got a new couch now. Courtesy and gifted kindly from Pavizin. So you can see here, I will be now giving recommendations to you in this format right here. I call this a huge upgrade. So the other couch, the yellow one, I got it like 4 years ago. And while it has served its purpose, I am so happy for this huge upgrade. Essentially, the biggest thing about this is that it feels like a normal couch, because the yellow couch that I had, it feels like you're constantly sliding off all the time, especially you're lying down in it. But now I don't ever have to worry about that anymore, because this feels like, like a normal, regular sized piece of furniture. Also from the fact that the materials itself on the couch, it's anti-scratch. Meaning Pierre's little tiny nails, those disastrous, dangerous claws of his, can't do any damage to this bad boy right here. The setup itself is so freaking easy. You don't need to nail anything. You don't need any tools or anything to set it up. All you need to do is just slide it together, which I'm sure you all know how to do, in bed and whatever. But now you can do it on a sofa. So yeah, the setting up part was so freaking easy, like over in like 15 seconds. So yeah, I am really thankful and grateful to Pavizin for sending this my way. And Pierre is too, it seems. I will leave a link to the couch down below, where I also have a coupon code that you can use to get 10% off of any purchase. Thank you to Pavizin for kindly gifting this couch and sending it my way. And now back to your regular broadcast. So before we continue, I had some issues, some technical difficulties with my camera. You're not going to even see me talking to the camera. I'm just going to insert some B-roll, some footage here, but the sound did record. So just an FYI, it's not going to be for the whole video. Please bear with me. I usually don't go off on a script or anything. I just say whatever comes to mind. There you go. So before we get further into some of the more recent favorites that I've read so far this year, I wanted to give a shout out to some of my all-time favorites, of all time. So starting with number one, the all-time backbone, the carry, Elias coded, Elias core, basically, right? Everything that made me who I am today, the personification, the backbone of this channel, if you will. If you know, you already know. It's The Raven Cycle by Maggie Stiefvater. This series legitimately changed me and just changed who I thought I was back in the day. My whole perception of just life in general, this changed my mindset on friendships. I don't think I've ever read such an intricate story about friendships just in general. It was just such a beautiful, evolving thing, and I ate every second of it. I loved it. It was just something I've never read before. And even then, I have still yet to read a book that would still capture that same essence, that same vibe and power. That is the relationships and the dynamic between these people, their friendship. It's just so raw and pure and true, so real. If you didn't know what the series is about, it's a YA, low-key, magical realism fantasy series. It's comprised of 4 books, and it's primarily about a group of friends who embark on a quest on a journey to wake a sleeping Grey King. A lot of it is based on Welsh mythology, and in waking this Grey sleeping king, they will be granted a wish. It's a lot more serious and profound than how it sounds, than how I'm explaining it to you. It is just so thought-provoking and beautiful in every sense. I have reread the series, I think, 3 or 4 times by now, but every single time I do a reread, there's just something so inexplicably charged, something I'm always finding new about the series, about the characters, the story in general, and I fucking love it. I even have a tattoo of the ley lines. It's my first tattoo I've ever gotten. It's pretty much my brand still to this day, and I fully embrace it. So if you're looking for a really dreamlike atmospheric book with aesthetic Tumblr vibes, with a really great lyrical prose, basically a story you've never read before, but I still have yet to this day read any books that are similar to this, definitely highly recommend. The Raven Cycle will always at utmost be my favorite series, if not my favorite books of all time. If I had to choose a favorite between the 4 books,
it would either be Blue Lily Lily Blue or The Raven King. I actually know a lot of people who didn't really like the ending of the series, but I fucking loved it. I loved every bit of it. I loved every sense of it, the way it ended, the ending in general. But Blue Lily Lily Blue also has a special place in my heart as well. All right, so this next book, a little controversial, but still to this day, I haven't stopped thinking about it ever since I finished it. And this is A Little Life by Hana Yanagihara. The reason why this book is just one of my favorites, it's because of the characters. What you will find most common in all of these books is either the writing or the characters, and less so about the story and the plot. I find that I gravitate towards books that are extremely character driven, and this one is no exception. The characters and the character study in here, their relationships with each other, oh my god, it was just so invigorating. It was just a heavy deep dive. I made a whole video about this. It was just this profound, delicate deep study into each of these characters. These 4 characters, especially revolving around one central character. And it basically primarily follows their relationships with each other as friends, as lovers, as people in general, from when they were still in college to when they're 70 to 80 years old. The character study, the portraits that Hanya just writes, is just so humanistic in its quality. And to me, what I loved about it, it was less so about the story. That was just what I loved about it, more so than the story itself. And I know this book is extremely triggering to some. Probably the most triggering book I've ever read in my entire life. It's pretty much the worst and the best book I've ever read to this date. I know that a lot of people have said that this book glorifies violence, especially towards queer and gay people in general. But while I do agree to that sentiment to some degree, I also agree that it's a very beautifully written character study of relationships between humans in general, between these friendships. So I really loved it. I still have yet to do a reread of this, but I'm a little scared to go back into it just because it took so much out of me emotionally as well and mentally. But someday I will go back and experience the trauma that I went through with this book. But so far, this has pretty much been my first and only Hana Yanagihara book that I have read. I still have yet to read her other books as well. But at the end of the day, this is also the book on this list that I would not recommend to just anyone out there. I'm just telling you guys that this is my personal favorite. However, just because this book is so triggering and traumatic, I would say it is best to steer clear of this book in general, with triggers especially to suicide and self-harm, child prostitution, rape, assault. Essentially most of the triggers that you would be mindful of going to other books, this book has it all. So just be aware that if you're going through this book not knowing anything much about it, I would definitely do some research on it before you go in. Okay, so next up on this list, we're gonna go with The Starless by Erin Morgenstern. So this book captivated me in every single way. This book took my breath away when it first came out. Actually, because I just already knew this book was gonna be an instant favorite, I got the other edition as well. And this is my most prized special edition that I own. And just look at it. Look at it. It is just so mesmerizing, so beautiful. And that's not it, because this is the book Naked. Naked. Look how beautiful it is. It is just chef's kiss, glorious, 10 out of 10. She's amazing, beautiful. I love her. My most prized possession, okay? This was a limited edition in I believe 3 or 4 different colors. I was secretly hoping for a darker red maroon color, but still pretty happy with what I got. I also got tattoos because of this book as well, a bee key and a sword. I mean, the US edition, also pretty beautiful as well, but nothing can beat that UK special collector's edition at all. And it's funny because when I got both editions, I wanted to utilize both of the books that I got. So I read the first half of the book with the US edition, and then I finished it with the UK edition. The best journey I've ever read in my entire life. This is the book. If I had to choose one book to save of my entire collection, it would be The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. I still have yet to do a reread of the series, but I already know I will love it even more fiercely and just more devotedly than before. This is the type of book where I just read it once and it became an instant fave. So if you already know it holds that much power in its first read, imagine what a second reread would do. It essentially follows our main character who finds a memory in his past childhood in a lost and forgotten titleless book, and through this he embarks on a journey of self-discovery that leads him to a subterranean realm of books, a world that is underneath our very own. This is a book, a love letter to all the books about stories, about books in here, and just finding yourself reflected in those stories. It's just so beautiful. There's also a gay romance in here that isn't like the highlights of the story of the book itself, but it's there and it's beautiful and it's slow moving and I fucking loved it. It's also very interesting and very telling that Erin Morgenstern has only written 2 full books, and both of those books have become instant favorites as well, but I would hold this one higher than The Night Circus.
So desperately waiting for whatever Aaron puts out in the near future, but I can say without a doubt, top favorite of all time. And I guess we can start off with Ocean Vuong. If you guys didn't already know, Unearthed or Briefly Gorgeous is another favorite book of mine. When I first read it, I could just relate with it so much about growing up in an Asian household, finding that Asian identity, appreciating it, about masculinity, self-love, identity, and just being queer in general. This book is so short, but it's just so divine, so impactful in every way, because his writing here, he is truly masterful, crafted, talented, and just the way he writes, it's so humane and grounding and raw and real. And A24 is also making this book into a movie as well. So this reads almost like a memoir. It basically is told in increments of letters that is written from the son to his mother. But the thing is, all of the letters are written in English to his mother, who actually can't read an ounce of English. And just the irony, the hypotheticals with it was just so moving and beautiful to read. I would definitely highly recommend this book if you're looking for something really moving, super profound, super slow, and super intricate as well. So that was my first book from Ocean Vuong. However, he was known for his work in poetry, and I, for one, have not read a lot of poetry for that matter, and so I decided to pick up two of his poetry works, Night Sky with Exit Wounds and Time is a Mother. Let me tell you, why did reading two books of poetry from Ocean Vuong made me want to write something of my own? Me, who as a reader has never had an inkling to write something of my own, like just stories in general. But after reading poetry, it somehow unlocked this sense of self, this urging to write, just stories in general. Not poetry per se, but just a book, right? I'm just like, what kind of power is held within these pages, within these words, between the letters? A lot of the things written here was just so deep, some of it relatable, and a lot of it just dealing with personal identity in general, with what it means to be queer, what it means to be a person trying to find your own identity in this world. The way he plays with words here in these two books with poetry is just unlike anything I've ever read before. Highly recommend if you're looking for just a start in poetry. Also, it's just not entirely poetry. There are some like short collection of essays in here, like a paragraph or so, and I loved every bit of it. So the next book I'm going to talk about on my favorites is The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. This is a book I read a couple years ago, and I still remember all the feelings I had to this day. I made a whole video talking about it because right after I finished it, I just had so much to say regarding the story, the romance between the two characters, and the writing. I wouldn't say this is like my most top favorite of all time, but it's still a favorite, right? It's a story I'm pretty familiar with the Iliad, but Madeline here expands upon the story between Achilles and Patroclus. Their relationship, oh my god, it was just so gay, and I fucking loved it. I mean, there isn't a whole ton of things I'm gonna say with this one, just because I made a whole video talking about it if you want to check it out. I read this as one of the picks for the Late Night Book Club, and it was one of the best decisions and one of the best books to come out of that book club. So yeah, The Song of Achilles remains close and dear to my heart to this day, especially that ending. If there was like another page or just another paragraph of that ending, it would have been like a perfect, like all-time favorite. But I think because it was lacking, just that extra oomph for personal reasons, still 5 out of 5, but it's just not as high as the other books on this list for me. All right, so the next set of books on this list is The Foxhole Court by Nora Sakavic. I mean, these pretty much go hand in hand with The Raven Cycle. The only similar attribute that they have with each other with The Raven Cycle is that the romance between the two love interests here, I don't want to say is comparable to the relationship in The Raven Cycle, but it sort of evokes, I don't know, the same feeling. Like if you read both series, like back in the day, people are always sort of comparing or giving the same recommendation if you read one or the other. And I would tend to agree with that sentiment as well. This one is a polar opposite from The Raven Cycle in its entirety. This is totally different. This is a self-published sports mafia romance trilogy, and it definitely reads like one as well. This entire set of books reads like a Wattpad fanfiction, and because of this, I wouldn't say I would go into it reviewing this series like it's like the greatest piece or work of art ever written or anything like that. I mean, reviewing and reading these books critically and analytically, that can't really happen. The representation in here, mental illness, trauma, just everything about it in general, it's pretty bad. So I would say, just be aware of that going in, but everything else, other than that, it's just like candy. I could not get enough of it, even after the first read. Like of all the books that I own, I have reread this trilogy countless number of times. So many times just rereading the same passages over and over again, and every single time I get this sense of I don't know how to describe it, like FOMO. Like it's almost a sense of like a reading slump where I don't want to read anything else aside from the stories about these characters. And I would get my fix by going on the author's Tumblr page. And on her Tumblr page, she has like a bunch of just Q&A sections of just little bonus tidbits and pieces detailing of what might have happened afterwards regarding these characters after the fact of this trilogy, or sometimes even just bonus content in between books as well. And even then, after going on and screenshotting and saving everything on that Tumblr page, I still was not satiated, but it is what it is. Every single time, without fail, this trilogy does it for me. Maybe after you finish reading The Raven Cycle, I guess if you're looking for something similar in the terms of how both of the leads take themselves very seriously in some aspects in different forms of literature, then this would be a recommendation for me. Very fun, don't take it seriously at all. The author makes up a sport here that's sort of like a mix between lacrosse, hockey, and rugby. It's very interesting with so many different characters. And the romance here, I've never read a book where the romance was taken so seriously before between these two boys with traumatic pasts. Like, the characters in here go through so much, almost borderline a little life, if you will. But while it does have lots of trauma, lots at stake, lots of angst, lots and lots of angst, it does have some really heartfelt moments for me. And I loved it. I mean, if you look at my reviews for the series, it's very incoherent, inconsistent, and doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. But yeah, this is one of my all-time favorite guilty pleasure trilogies to read from. I really, really love it. All right, so speaking of gay romance, I'm going to talk about Summer Suns by Lee Mandello. This was another favorite, a quiet favorite of mine that sort of crept on me by accident. I didn't really know what to expect. If I had to choose anything remotely close coming to the same vibe and setting as The Raven Cycle, it would be this book. This book has a lot of similarities between The Raven Cycle, where it has gay romance, hot summers, fast cars, drugs, parties, ghosts. So a lot of similar and parallel crossovers, but they are extremely different in the fact that this one is adult. I would say this is like a darker, edgier, messier, more depressing, older brother of The Raven Cycle, if you will. I loved it. It's basically about a young man before he goes into the graduate program with his best friend. His best friend supposedly dies by suicide. However, he doesn't believe that, and he goes sort of to investigate the death of his friend. However, he finds that a lot of the things that his best friend has left behind for him have a lot of dangerous secrets. And more importantly, he begins to see ghoul or ghost versions of his dead best friend. So there are a lot of weird and ghastly things bumping into the night, really weird things going on here. Sort of explores the aspects of familial and generational curses, which I thought was really interesting as well. So this book takes place in Nashville, and you can really feel like the summery heat, the hot, sparking romance between the two guys. This was also, in of itself, funny enough, one of the more straighter gay romances I've ever read, just because I do know that, being queer, everything is on a spectrum, right? There isn't just one whole definition of what it means to be gay or queer and all that. But here, if I had to walk past these two main characters down the street, I would have never guessed. My gaydar would have never flashed on walking past these two characters. But I really liked it. I really liked how protective they were of each other, especially the, I guess I want to say, in this case, the dominant one. I still have yet to do a reread of this as well. But this also holds the same degree or level as Song of Achilles, where it isn't like an all-time favorite, but it's still a favorite nonetheless. Contrast to Summer Suns, where I said it wasn't like an all-time favorite, Piranesi by Susanna Clarke is an all-time goddamn favorite. Of all of the books on here, this one is the most nostalgic in terms of all the magical moments, the sense of wonder I had as a child. Just watching or reading Alice in Wonderland for the first time, or reading the Chronicles of Narnia as a kid. Just that sense when I was reading books as a kid versus now, it is just extremely different. I was just more innocent, more naive, more wholesome back then, with just a bigger sense of amazement for all the things that I've read in this book. This book captured that amazement perfectly. This is definitely a book that would bring that sense of nostalgia back to your childhood self. And I'm not going to say too much about it other than the fact that this is one of those books where you have to go in completely blind. I would describe this book as maybe something you might have forgotten back in the day until you go outside and you smell something that all of a sudden brings you back into a memory that you might have forgotten or lost before, or even a dream that you might have had as a kid or a person you never met before that you haven't remembered until, this time. So this is what this book did for me. It was like this sense of wonder and amazement and just joy in general. And it was just so utterly nostalgic. I fucking loved it. It's also extremely short as well. One of my favorite books of all time. And if you couldn't tell, I named Piranesi after Piranesi, Pura for short. And of all the books on this list, this is a definite recommend for me. All right, so the next book on my favorites list is The Cat Who Saved Books. This was a book that I read not knowing too much about it going in. And after finishing it, I was just not amazed per se at the story or just even the writing itself. I was more amazed at the context of the feelings that came with this book, like how it evoked such strong feelings of empathy and compassion within me, upon completing and finishing this. It was just so deep and profound. I know I'm repeating myself a lot here with using the words deep and profound, but truly this book was just different from the rest in the fact that I wasn't impressed with the story itself in general, but more so the messages and the subtleness behind it, if you will. It was just so soft and compassionate and comfortable, and at times very peaceful even as well. So I don't know what it was, but this one also became an instant classic favorite of mine as well. I really want to read more from this author, but it turns out his other books have yet to be translated to English. This is a book about a young high school boy who, after the death of his grandfather, inherits a bookstore. However, in this bookstore, he meets a talking cat who magically speaks to him and asks him to embark on this journey to save books. And how about the boy and the cat go on and save these books was truly just an insightful, introspective look in general on just the love of reading. This book, I guess, was a subtle ode to every lover of books out there, to all the readers, and I just, to put it simply, loved it. So now we have come to the end. Last and not least, of course, we have Swimming in the Dark. This was also a very short book that I read a couple weeks ago, and it follows the summer romance between two Polish boys over the course of one summer and beyond. It was just so tantalizingly beautiful. Like, I'm still at a loss for words to describe how this book made me feel in general. The way the author described their relationship and its progression, like, you just had to be there. It felt like you weren't just a witness or intruding, like watching their relationship grow or happen. It was more so that you were feeling and living it with them as well. Like, I truly felt, because of this book, I fell in love before, and all of these circumstances and the aspects that came along with it. It was just that good of a read. I would definitely recommend it. There's a lot more to it as well, but I don't want to give away too much just because the book itself is so short. I flew through it, and I also remember the time of day I read it as well. It was during sunrise. Like, the sunlight was streaming in through the windows. The sun rays were hitting different things throughout the room, creating shadows. It was just, above all, so intricate and personal, and I loved it. So please go do yourself a favor if you're looking for a light summer read, albeit bittersweet, if you will. But such is life and love. So yeah, that is pretty much it for this video. Please let me know some of your past, recent favorite reads. I would love to know, get some more recommendations. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and I will see you all soon with a new video.